Hi everybody, it's Terry Ryder from Hotspotting. I've heard so much over the last 4 or 5 years about the growth in the Sydney market and the Melbourne market. It might be easy to believe that there hasn't been growth happening anywhere else in Australia. Of course, that's not the case. There's been plenty of other locations showing growth, just not getting the same attention from our media, which mostly comes out of Sydney and Melbourne, and hence the focus on those markets as being the be-all and end-all. But there's been plenty of other places that have shown growth. At the same time, we've been hearing that Southeast Queensland hasn't been doing much. Well, that's not true either. The latest figures from the REIQ shows that there's been plenty of strong price growth in markets such as the Sunshine Coast and the Gold Coast, particularly in specific locations. And often we do need to look a little bit behind the generalised growth figures. Too often we're given a single figure to describe growth in a particular market, and it's often very misleading. It disguises the fact that individual precincts, individual local government areas or individual suburbs are doing much, much better, and it's the task of property investors to find those outperforming growth areas. Some examples on the Sunshine Coast over the last 5 years. Here's the figures from the REIQ. The suburb of Minyama has grown, its median price has grown 70%, and there are a number of suburbs that have grown 60% or better as well across the Sunshine Coast, including Moffat Beach, Dickey Beach. Those are both in the Caloundra area. A little bit further north, Alexandra Headland, and further north again, Coolum Beach. All locations where over the last 5 years prices have grown 60 or more percent. But the leading location, according to these figures, on the Sunshine Coast has been the upmarket, the suburb of Minyama, not far from the central location of Maroochydore and Mooloolaba, up 70%. On the Gold Coast, the market leader, according to these figures, has actually been Mermaid Beach, which is one of the prime suburbs for expensive residential. Median price there up 80% in the last 5 years, and then a number of other locations on the Gold Coast have had growth of 60 to 65%, and they include Burleigh Heads, Palm Beach, Broad Beach Waters, which is a canal suburb a little bit inland from the coast, Miami and Holywell, all locations that have grown 60 to 65% in the last 5 years, which is pretty strong growth, anyone's measure. Are they still growing? Because there's plenty of headlines in particularly national media that are now saying that Australian property prices are falling. Well, of course, that ridiculous generalisation is simply untrue. It's the average for capital cities is certainly being dragged down by the weight of the experience of Sydney, where prices are falling undoubtedly, but plenty of other locations where they are rising. They include Hobart and Canberra and many of our major regional centres. And certainly the Sunshine Coast market is still going ahead strongly, very strong transition economy where there's plenty more potential for growth there. I think the Gold Coast market has tapered off a little bit, although plenty of people are predicting a second wind as a result of the Commonwealth Games effect. I think that may be overrated. But anyway, just some examples of other places other than Sydney and Melbourne that have had strong growth over the last 4 or 5 years, and in some cases are still growing. That's it for now. Terry Ryder from hotspotting.com.au signing off. Before I do, if you're interested in learning more about those markets, so go to the hotspotting.com.au website and check out our location reports page, where we do have detailed reports on markets like the Gold Coast and the Sunshine Coast and many other places around Australia. That's it. Signing off. Talk to you again soon. Terry Ryder from Hotspotting. Goodbye for now.